all these guys. So when it's like Robbie Lawler and Nick Diaz, I was like, I want them both to win, you know?
I agree with what you're saying. I try, even as a commentator, because I'm in a weird spot where I'm talking about the fights.
Yeah.
I try to be as neutral as possible, and that's why it was insanely hard when Brendan Schaub was fighting. Dude, that was watching Schaub get beat up was some of the hardest. It was so hard for me. It was so hard for me. It was so hard because, like, I genuinely love that dude.
Yeah.
And I saw where this was going, and I was like, shit. Like, you got to get out now. Like, you got to get out now. Like, this is not something. There's a point of no return when a guy starts getting KO'd by giants.
Mm-hmm.
Giants. I mean, like Ben Rothwell. You ever been around Ben Rothwell?
No.
You want to feel like a feeble person? No. Shake hands with Ben Rothwell, and you go, oh, well, you could just eat me if you wanted to.
Yeah.
There's dudes out there like that, like Tom Erickson. He was 300 pounds natural. And one of the best wrestlers in MMA. He was 300 pounds. They called him the Big Cat because he was 300. But that's Ben Rothwell. That's a giant human being that should have a battle axe in his hand. Jesus. He should be showing up on a boat with one of them dragons at the front of it. You know those fucking Viking boats? Look at that man. In another world, that guy would be fucking showing up at the front of the boat, and you would have a real problem on your hands.
Jesus, man.
There's a bunch of those dudes, man.
I sat with Brendan when he was getting ready to tell a story about fight. He was doing the Ari thing.
Yeah.
And Ari's like, hit me up. He was like, hey, man, will you sit with Brendan and help him go over his story, help him figure it out? And he told me the whole story of that fight with Travis Brown.
Yeah, Travis Brown.
And it's fucking fascinating when you hear these guys talk about what goes through. Especially, I think Brendan's, I don't mean this out of disrespect to anyone else, but I think he's a little bit more insightful about the things that maybe I would feel if I walked into the ring.
Yes.
You know, like who he sees and what's happening.
Well, he's also honest, and he can make fun of himself.
Yeah. It's a little more humble in like the sense, and it was so connective. Like, we did like an hour. He told me the whole story for an hour, and then we kind of talked about what highlights a good story and what makes a good story. It was really fucking fascinating.
He's a great dude. He really is. And he's a fun guy to be around. That's why all his friends love him so much. You know, like, people don't like him because he's first of all, you know, whether you judge his comedy or judge his podcast or judge whether, you also have to judge how he looks. And he's a beautiful man, and it's a real problem for people. Guy. He's a beautiful man, and he's like 6'5". Great
head of hair.
He's built like a fucking Adonis.
It really is.
It really makes people uncomfortable, me included. I'm his friend. He just has massive advantage, and the way you're gonna hate on him. But he's a great guy. If you just know him, he's a great guy. And I saw him getting hurt, and I was like, he doesn't really want to do this anymore. But he's doing this. It's like it's incomparable because my martial arts competition days were very insignificant in comparison to his. You know, fighting. I mean, he knocked out Crow Cop. He knocked out Minotauro. So I'm not trying to compare myself to him, but I'm going to compare a moment in my life where I knew I had to stop competing because I wasn't really doing it anymore. I was I was training sort of, but I was also doing stand-up comedy, and I was working all day, and I kind of knew that I had to get out, but it was my identity, and I was 21 years old, and I hadn't really figured out how to make real plans for myself. And I was realizing that I was training and competing with people that were way more into it than I was. And I realized, oh my God, I'm not into it the same way I used to be. Like, I forgot what it was like when I was at my peak when I was 19, when I literally have no problems in the world. I was young and stupid. I was out of high school, so I didn't have to go to school anymore. And I was taking a year off of school before I went to college. And I had all this time to just train. And I was obsessed, and that's all I did was train all day. But by the time I was 21, dude, I was training like 4 days a week, maybe 5, and I wasn't training like it was my whole life. I was doing it because it was like a thing that I always did. And then I was fighting. And then I realized I was like, I got to stop now, or I'm going to get my brain scrambled. Because I'm meeting people who are like I used to be, but I'm not like them anymore.
Yeah.
I'd lost the obsession. And I knew that Schaub lost the obsession. I knew that he was a great athlete and that early on in his career,
he's
particularly
way
like
better
the Crow
at
Cop
what he
KO.
does now. He's way better at what he does.
No, he's
now.
a great fighter, dude. Don't get me wrong.
But
like
no, but
he choked out Matt Mitrione. Like people give him shit for what he did. Matt Mitrione is a fucking pro football player athlete with serious knockout power, like serious fucking KO power. He KO'd Fedor. Okay.
Wow.
Yes, exactly. And Brendan Schaub choked him the fuck out. And he can do that. He's really good. I mean, he knocked out Crow Cop. Crow Cop is like legitimately one of the best strikers to ever fight in MMA. And granted, it was Crow Cop later in his life. Granted, it was Crow Cop after he had these wars in Pride and then came over to the UFC. And it's just being a human, getting hit a bunch of times. You lose something somewhere along the way. So I don't think that was the Crow Cop that fought Fedor the first time, but it was still motherfucking Crow Cop.
Yeah.
And Brendan Schaub KO'd him. So it's like he had it at one time. But you can see when fighters don't have it anymore when it becomes a job. Like Joseph Benavidez just retired, and one of the things that he said was that he realized he was not going to get a chance to fight for the world title again, and he didn't want MMA to be just a job. And it's a brilliant thing to say because it's brutally honest. It's brutally honest. And it takes a sensitive, intelligent person like him. He goes, I don't want this to be a job. I wanted to be the best in the world. He was very close to being the best in the world. He was most certainly number 2 for quite a long time. And maybe even was number 1, but he didn't get a shot. It was like you got a window as an athlete to be at your best before the tissue, just the RPMs and the fucking trauma of just regular training. Even if you're just not even getting hit, just regular training. Just hitting the bag, just fucking doing CrossFit, just doing those kind of like kettlebell exercises and plyos and jumping box jumps. Your tissue is getting stressed everywhere. How long can you do that for? Like that hardcore at a world-class level? You might have 10 years in you. You know, they say fighters, they have like 9 years.
So wait, here's my question is like, what percentage of fighters that get that, this is a tough question. Meaning, what's the percentage of fighters that get into the UFC that fighters that try to get into the UFC? Is it like baseball? Because every kid plays baseball growing up.
Well, I think baseball's most certainly more popular than the UFC because it's in colleges, it's in high schools. There's like a direct path, right? To be an ace high school player, you get into a good college and a scholarship, you kick ass in that college, you get drafted by the Yankees. I mean, there's a direct path, right? There's not such a direct path as an MMA fighter. It's more complicated.